Hey there, guys. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and welcome to another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Now, as many of you probably know, I review a lot of mechanical keyboards on this channel, and I often get comments that say something like, "This keyboard looks great. I really like almost everything about it, except for there's maybe one or two things that I don't like." Maybe it's something like the switch that the person wants is not available on this board, or maybe they don't like the layout, they'd like it to be a little bigger or a little smaller. Has this ever happened to you? It's a pretty common occurrence, I find, especially based on the feedback I get in the comments. But the wonderful thing about mechanical keyboards is how customizable they can be. So, for your typical off the shelf mechanical keyboard, you can, of course, swap out the keycaps, and that can go a long way to changing the way it looks. But what if you want to get a little bit more involved and dial in exactly what you want? You know, a particular case, particular PCB, particular switches and caps. Well, it used to be that you needed to put in a fair bit of time and have some skill with soldering so that you could solder the switches to the board and put it all together. But these days, there are a ton of options for hot swappable PCBs, circuit boards, that allow you to very easily pop in switches and pull them out. No soldering required. It takes a matter of minutes to replace all the switches on your board. And this has made custom keyboards a lot more accessible and less intimidating for many people. So, what I'm going to be doing here today is kind of a hybrid video. This is going to be one part DIY build your own keyboard tutorial video, and one part a review of the pieces that I'm going to be using in this keyboard. I actually approached Banggood about doing a video like this, and they were really enthusiastic about it, so they have supplied all the parts that I'm going to be working with here today. So I'm starting off with a 60% DIY keyboard kit. This is the Geek Customized Hot Swappable DIY Keyboard Kit, the GK61 version of this kit. There's a few different sort of 60% sized layouts that you can get. The GK61 is the standard 60% 61 key layout with the widest keycap compatibility. And it's available in actually a few different kinds on Banggood's website. You can get it with an ABS plastic case for about $50, I think. You can get it with a wooden case for about $80 US, or you can get it with the machined aluminum case for $90 US. I'm going to be using the kit with the machined aluminum case here today because I've never actually checked out an aluminum keyboard case for a 60% board before, so I'm really excited to see that. Along with the case, these kits will get you the PCB, which has full RGB backlighting, surface mount LEDs on it. It, of course, has those hot swappable sockets, so there's no soldering required. And it also has a metal backplate and pre-installed stabilizers. And the package comes with a USB cable to connect your computer, as well as a couple pullers for keycaps and switches. You'll see all that stuff once we dive into putting the board together. But in addition, I've got some switches. I've got two different kinds of switches that we're going to be trying out here today. These are kind of a little bit more exotic than your average Cherry MX or Outemu clone switch. I've got a pair of Kale Box Heavy switches. Kale Box Heavy Pale Blues, which are very, very clicky, and the Kale Box Heavy Burnt Oranges, which are a tactile switch. We'll talk more about those switches and what the heavy means and what they sound like and feel like when we get to the unboxing and the building of the board. But they both sound like very interesting switches that I'm keen to check out. And finally, of course, we'll be installing keycaps. And the keycaps that I'm using on this are just generic pudding caps. They are in white and they are made of PBT. And the full 108 key set is available from Banggood for just $20. So I have high hopes for that kit because that is an awesome price on a full set of PBT caps. And the white pudding caps should look amazing with the aluminum case and the RGB backlighting. Of course, keycaps can be more expensive than that. Sky's the limit, you know. You can get whatever you want. Same goes for switches. These Kale box switches come in at about $33 for a pack of 70, which is what I've got, 2 packs of 70. But you can get Gatoron switches, Cherry switches, whatever you want, Outemu switches. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of building your own board. I've also got a small pack of O-rings, which are to dampen the sound of each keystroke. And this pack of O-rings I got from Banggood. They are $3.50 for 150 little O-rings, which is super, super cheap. And if you like the sound of them, you'll get to see them and hear them later in the video. If you like the way they sound, it's a really cheap, easy addition that can pretty dramatically change the feel of your typing experience. Alright, so I think that's all I wanted to say here. The links for all these products are, of course, down in the video description. You can check them out there. Oh, one other thing, very important. I'm doing this video in 2 parts, 2 pieces. I had originally planned to do it all in one, but as the production went along, it turned out this is going to be really, really long. And I thought it was better to split it into 2 pieces than to try and rush it all into one and have just a big, super long video where everything felt rushed. So in part 1, we're going to be unboxing everything. I'm going to install the first set of switches, which are going to be the pale blue switches, the clicky ones. I'll put on the keycaps and the O-rings. Then we'll take the board for a little test drive. We're going to do look at the lighting that's available in hardware, and we're going to take it for a test typing session so you guys can hear it in action. Then in part 2, which will follow in about a week after I publish this one, you guys will see the burnt orange switches. I'll swap out all the pale blues for all those burnt oranges. We'll do a typing test with those, and we'll check out the software for this keyboard in part 2. Because that's going to be an important part of the story as well, of course. And then, after all that, at the end of part 2, I will break down my pros and my cons about all these products and give you my final verdict. So, there's a lot here. This is going to be a long video. So, buckle up or rest your head, since this is relaxing, at least in theory. And let's dive right in to this DIY keyboard build. Alright, so here we have the Geek customized GK61 in box. And I will remind you, this is just the case and the circuit board, the PCB, and the backplate and the stabilizers, as you'll see in a moment. The other parts we'll look at separately in just a moment. So this is a multi-part unboxing and review, because of course we're going to be looking at it all and then assembling it. Alright, so the box isn't much to look at, and like many of the boxes that I've received from Banggood lately, it's in pretty rough shape. There was some tape on it that I took off. That's what you see here, just so that I can get into it more easily. But the box itself, really not much to see there. It's got this logo on the front, which I guess is the Geek logo, whatever their branding is. It looks like a 6 plus. Maybe it's a 61. I'm not sure. Either way, that's all that's on the front. Nothing else. And then nothing on the front flap. Nothing on either end. And on the spine we just have a, serial number from Banggood. Or SKU, I should say. Product number. That was upside down, but doesn't really reveal anything about what's inside. It just has the SKU and a barcode, and it says made in China. And then literally nothing on the back either. So this packaging is, I think it is the most bare bones packaging that I have ever seen on a keyboard product, ever. Now, of course, these packages are not made for retail at a store. They're made for online sale, and so presumably you know what you're getting when you order it online. All the information is on the product website, but still, it feels a bit low rent, doesn't it? Now, that said, it is very heavy. This feels like I'm holding a brick almost. There's a lot of weight to this. And that's because the case inside, as I mentioned, is aluminum. So let us open it up and see what we got. I have to say, I think the beat up state of the case has more to do with the carrier that ships it than it is Banggood. I'm sure it ships out in good condition from Banggood. The last few packages I've received have been from DHL, and I've not been impressed with the state they've turned up in. All been a bit beaten up. Okay, so here we have the package. There is no customary sort of foamy bag. Instead, it's this very crinkly clear plastic, and as a matter of fact, very little protection afforded for this package overall. There's a little bit of sort of buffering on either side here, just from the cardboard, and same on these sides. A bigger buffer over here because there's stuff over on the right side here. I suspect a cable and such. But nothing on top and nothing underneath. So I hope everything has arrived intact, given that the box looks like it got tossed around and crushed a couple times. Okay, let's start with, let's start over here with packages. It looks like a pretty minimal package from that perspective. We get a USB Type-C cable, and it's nice to see it is braided, and it has a Velcro strap, and it feels pretty substantial and also looks pretty long. No special branding on either end, just a black housing, gold-plated connector, and standard USB Type-C, also gold-plated on this end. But it does feel like it's a nice heavy gauge. It's somewhat stiff. The braiding feels good quality, so that's nice, actually. That's pretty nice. One complaint, though, that I have right off the bat is that it's black, and this case is silver aluminum. It's not going to look bad with a black cable, but a gray cable or even a white cable would look a lot nicer. But that's a minor quibble. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that the same black braided cable will ship with the wooden and the plastic versions of this case. And in the case of the plastic case, that is a black plastic case, in which case this cable would go match very well. I gotta find a different way to say that. Too much case. Okay, we'll put that aside for now. And then we have the very bare minimum of removers here, pullers. We've got a keycap puller. Probably the cheapest one I've ever seen. It is the clipping type, not a wire type. I much prefer the wire type. It's just a little piece of black plastic with little clippies on the ends. And the wire types are better than these clippy types because These clippy types can scratch or damage your keycaps if you're not careful. Not, guaranteed to do so, but it's a possibility. With the wire ones, not so much. Alright, so that's pretty cheap. And then here we have, again, just about the cheapest you could imagine, is a switch puller, because of course this is a modular board. We will be adding our own switches, and after that, if you want, you can swap them out at any time, and I will be doing that as well, as you'll see in a moment. I do have 2 different kinds of switches here today. So that's what this is for. And again, it's just a clip style. These little metal tabs just clip on either side of the switch. You squeeze, like so, and you pull it out. That should be pretty straightforward, but it's just a piece of metal. Just a cheap piece of metal. So, not much in the way of pack-ins here. And the ones that are here are pretty bare bones quality. But, let's see what the board itself is like. Oh, there's one more thing in here that we have to look at first. But holy heck, this is heavy. This is really heavy. My gosh, that is super solid. Like solid enough that it's kind of hard to lift out. There's a lot of aluminum in that thing. That is not a skimpy case. Last piece here is our quick start guide. Let's get this box out of the way, since it's really a kind of a disappointing box, isn't it? Quick start guide in Chinese gives the layout and the secondary function layer shortcuts. Oh, okay. Looks like we might have English and Chinese here. Yes, we do. Okay, so Chinese on this side, and what it has actually is layouts for the GK61, the GK62, which has a slightly different bottom right corner, and the GK64, which has a very different bottom right corner. But it's a shared manual, and I'm just going to put it this way for you. Here we have in English, not that it really matters that much, but GK61, 62, and 64 again. And for some reason, the secondary function layers are labeled on the GK64 on the English side. Oh, it was the same. It was the same on the Chinese side, okay. But I suspect the secondary functions are the same, or very similar, between the 61 and the 64. And then we do have some writing here. Features. Ergonomic and anti-fatigue design for long time using. Tactile and long life mechanical switches. That is incorrect. There are no switches included with this. So this is just what they pack in with their full boards, clearly. Anti-ghosting for all keys. So that's full N key rollover. Switches are pluggable, which I mean, of course, hot-swappable. 16.8 million RGB, colorful backlight. 5 configurable modes, macro, recording, driver software, PBT keycaps, not the case here. List those as optional, of course. I believe the GK64 has a set of PBT caps you can get for it. Built-in flash memory, USB Type-C, all those things. A bunch of specifications. Weight and such, which is probably not accurate. 500 grams to 1200 grams. This would be the 1200 gram board. And then it has some keyboard shortcuts for changing the lighting. All that information is there. It's reasonably readable. So, but not too much else other than that there. Multifunction Okay, well, we'll explore that a bit more later when we get to the checking out the lighting and the typing experience and the software. But for now, we will leave that because I'm very keen to get to this here board. Oof, what a heavy, heavy board or case. So let's get it out of the plastic. This might be a bit loud. I'm going to turn it down probably because this is very crinkly plastic. So yeah, the plastic's super crinkly. It's got just a envelope style, the sticky line on the back here to keep it shut. But of course, this offers minimal protection. Doesn't really do anything except protect it from dust and fingerprints. Let's get that out here. Okay, here is the case. And what a case it is. You can see it is a compact 60% layout. And included in the package, as I described, we have the case itself, the back plate, some stabilizers pre-installed, and of course the PCB underneath with all the sockets for the switches. So let's take a cruise around this case. You can see it's made of a nice thick aluminum. Look at the thickness of that aluminum. It feels very, very solid. And it's same on all sides. You can see the backplate is slightly recessed, only slightly, into the case there. The backplate itself is also pretty thick, if you look, and I believe it is also aluminum. I think I read that. So that's nice. But you know what? It's got no flex to it when I push down on it. None whatsoever. Very firm. Makes nice noise. Keys that bottom out on that are going to be quite loud. But we have something. We have something for that. Some people like bottoming out on a hard strike like that, but not me so much. We'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, let's keep looking at the case. So the front, very low profile. It has this cutout here, which we'll see from the back in a moment. But that's somewhat visible from the front. It's this, the texture is this very nice, it's like a blasted aluminum. I don't know what they call it. And it's not really anodized. I think it's, like a sandblasted, but it's pretty smooth. And then you can see it has a built-in incline to it. So we have a cutout here on the side, which is stylistic. Doesn't really serve any purpose other than that. But we have this nice clean line that comes right up here. And we end up with probably about 4 or 5 degrees of incline from front to back. And that's non-adjustable, of course. The edges are nicely finished and rounded. All the edges are nicely finished. No sharp edges on here whatsoever. Really nicely machined. I guess that's what this is, machined aluminum. I don't know. I guess it's finished with some kind of blasting. In this back corner here, back left corner, we have our USB Type-C connector. It's a nice little cutout, just nestled away in there. And then a similar situation to the front where we have just a completely clean back bezel here and this cutout again, which we'll take a look at from the back in a moment. Exactly the same design around this side. Nice smooth corners. Alright, and then from the back, it's already starting to pick up some fingerprints. But not as bad as if it were glossy plastic or something. On the back, would you look at that? There's literally nothing on the back. I expected some branding or specifications or certifications at the very least, but there is nothing. It's clean, and I like that. That helps add to the sort of custom feel, doesn't it? You know, not having a bunch of branding or stickers all over it. So those cutouts that we saw from the front, turns out were this kind of, these X-shaped cutouts here. Don't really know that they have a purpose other than to look kind of cool and maybe save a little bit of aluminum. And then we've got 4 rubber feet. 1, 2, 3, 4 in white textured rubber for anti-skid purposes. And that is it. There's literally nothing else there. But look at how thick all around the use of aluminum is. It is very generous. It feels incredibly solid. There is like less than 0 flex to this. It is very stiff. And like I said, it's heavy. It's over 1 kilogram, right? If the specs are to be believed there. So that's fantastic. It just feels really nice. Now, of course, this is available in wood and also in plastic, and each one is a bit cheaper than the aluminum. The aluminum is the priciest of the cases. Obviously, I don't have the wooden or aluminum cases here, so I cannot speak to their quality, but I suspect that they functionally are going to be pretty much identical to this. And as a matter of fact, I will be reviewing another keyboard from this company with the same form factor but different layout of switches or of keys. But the case, I believe, for that one is the plastic case that would come with this customizable package. And so we'll get a peek at the plastic version of this case in the coming weeks, and we'll be able to assess it. But yeah, really minimalist, very, very solid, very, very nice quality. Incredibly impressed and pleased with this case. Alright, we'll take a quick peek back around the front here before we move on to the next piece. As you can see, of course, the backplate and PCB are both in white, which is very nice, matches very well, and it should provide good reflective surfaces for the RGB backlighting to help it really shine, diffuse and reflect and shine. Let's take a quick look at these stabilizers. I'm just trying to figure out. They are factory lubricated, so that's a great sign. That's a nice little detail. But you can hear they're not rattly at all. Unlike some other stabilizers, they have a little bit of rattle, but minimal, and that's the lubricant that prevents the rattle. Oh, the space bars maybe not. Harder to tell with the space bars. This one's a little rattly, but these guys, not at all. And I'll try and get this up real close there so you can actually see. You can see the lubrication around the stem, but it's not spilling over or anything, so that's a good sign. And then let's take a quick look at each switch socket. You'll see in each socket there's a little SMD surface mount LED up at the top, and then there are 2 contacts there. The ones at the bottom of the socket there, those are the actual prongs, the electrical conductivity from the switch, or the prongs that, you know what I'm trying to say. They're the ones that actually carry the data when the switch is depressed. And I believe this should accommodate all your Cherry style switches. So that'll include Cherry switches, Gatoron switches, Kale switches, Outemu switches. And in fact, I have all of those kinds of switches, and I will try them all out in this board in just a moment, or in a few minutes, so that we can see how they work. But that's it. That's what you get with the Geek Customized GK61 DIY kit here. So let's take a look at the other pieces that we're going to be adding to this board before we actually start putting it together. Next up, we have the switches, which are perhaps the most fun part of putting together your own keyboard, because doing so allows you to get exactly the feel under your fingertips that you want, and it allows you to potentially experiment as well. Most people are familiar, or at least have heard of, Cherry's MX mechanical switches. They are the prototypical mechanical switch that has been dominant in the market for many years. They've got the MX Blues, the MX Browns, the Reds, and that's what most people are familiar with. But since Cherry's patent on that design ran out back in 2012, I think, thereabouts, there's been an explosion in the diversity of mechanical Cherry style switches, and that's fantastic for you and for me, for us as mechanical keyboard enthusiasts, because there are more options now than ever. And in fact, many of these switches that have appeared on the market are, in my opinion, superior to Cherry's MX originals. And so what we have here today are a couple of less common switch types. On the left here, we have Kale's Box Heavy Pale Blues. I'll explain what that is in a second. And on the right, we have Kale's Box Heavy Burnt Orange switches. So let's start with the Pale Blues. I'll move these aside here. The Box Heavy Pale Blues are a clicky switch. They are a clicky switch manufactured by Kale, and they still have, of course, the Cherry style stems that you're familiar with. They have the same kind of housing and the same kind of contacts, and like Cherry's MX Blues, they click. But it's a different kind of click, and you might notice that they actually click twice. Once when you depress, and once on the way up. Depress, and on the way up. And Kale's Box Heavy Pale Blues are actually very similar to their Box White switches, in that the clicking mechanism, rather than the slider that you get in a Cherry MX Blue, these guys, the Pale Blues as well as the Box Whites, use a click bar mechanism essentially inside there, and it makes for a much more pronounced, or much firmer and more definite click. I want to say it's less rattly. It's a more precise click. And I reviewed a board with the Kale Box Whites quite some time ago. It was the the Motospeed CK61, I believe it was. I'll put a link to that review that you can click through on. But that had the Kale Box Whites, and I really, really liked the feel of those switches. I liked the precision of the click. So these Kale Box Heavy Pale Blues use the same click bar mechanism as Kale's Box Whites, but they use a heavier spring. So you actually, the actuation force of this switch is 60 grams, and the bottom out force, once you're past that click point, is 80 grams. And so it's definitely a heavier style of switch, but I've never used them before, and they sounded interesting, so I thought we'd try them out for this build as a nice clicky option. Generally speaking, Kale's box switches offer a handful of improvements over Cherry's designs. The actual mechanism inside is enclosed within a box, hence the box name, which actually confers some level of water resistance and dust resistance. I can't remember exactly what the IPX rating is, but it's higher than Cherry's switches anyway. And the surround around the stem here is intended to provide more stability in the downstroke, so there's less wobble in these switches. So overall, interesting option that I thought we would try out here today. But of course, this is a hot swappable board, so I got a second set of switches for us to play around with. And I'm actually going to install these ones first, and we'll do a typing test with these guys, and then after that I'll install the box heavy pale blues. So these are Kale's box heavy burnt orange switches, and they are very similar to the pale blues we looked at, but they're a tactile switch, very comparable to Cherry's MX Browns. They have a little bump in there, but not a click. So you can feel when you've actuated the switch, but it doesn't make a bunch of noise. In terms of the weight, they are the same actuation force as the box heavy pale blues, so they're a heavier switch. And the bump is subtle. It's right near the top of their action, and it's quite subtle. So I will be interested to try those out. I have a board, the Opens and Pro 2, that uses Kale's box Browns, which is essentially this switch, same mechanism inside, except the burnt oranges here again have a heavier spring. So the burnt orange is to Kale box Browns as the heavy pale blues, heavy pale blues are to Kale's box white switches. If that makes sense. There's a lot of switch nerdiness going on here. You can go online and read up about these switches if you're curious. There are, of course, links down in the video description to all these products. But we will be trying out both of them on this board, and you will be able to hear and see what a difference the different switches can make, and just how easy it is to swap them out on a hot swappable board like this one. So let's put those aside for just a moment, because I have a couple more things to show you before we actually get to putting the board together. So of course we need keycaps for our board, and because we went with the aluminum silver model of the case, I kind of wanted something that wasn't black. I wanted something a bit brighter, but I also wanted something shine through. And so this set of pudding caps provides the perfect pairing, I think. We'll see, of course, when we get it all set up and working. But these pudding caps, as they're called, have a really unique design that really shows off RGB lighting nicely. So you can find these kinds of caps in black or white. I think Banggood sells both, and they're honestly quite inexpensive for a full set like this. It was a little over $20, which is very cheap as far as keycaps go. But you can see that, let's just take the escape key here as an example. The tops are an opaque white. These are made of PBT, which is a high quality material. Has a nice texture, doesn't shine up. You typically pay more for PBT caps, but not these guys. But it has an opaque top with a shine through legend. This is double shot, so you don't have to worry about these legends ever fading. This opaque white transitions to a translucent white in the bottom portion of the cap. That allows the backlighting to shine out through that translucent part. But it's kind of a diffuse light that you get through, because it's like a frosted translucent plastic. So you end up with this really nice diffuse glow, a very soft glow to your RGB lighting that plays out across the whole board, as well as the nice sharp legends. And these legends are very nice and sharp for double shot caps. I must admit, I have a set that's just like this, except in black, so I kind of knew what to expect. But these are a killer set of caps for the price, for I think $22. They look fantastic, and you get the full 108 key set. And they're nice and thick, not as thick as those caps on that Ajaz board that I reviewed recently, but still completely respectable. Thicker than a lot of stock caps you get on cheaper boards. And they've got these really lovely sharp legends. Now, the one thing that I have noticed on this set is that some of them have some little blemishes on them. Like there, you see there's a little black blemish. The H key, I think, has one there, yeah, on the side. That's too bad. I suspect that's an issue with shipping, because actually when I got these in the mail, once again, it looked like they'd been treated a little bit poorly, and they were kind of all jumbled around. A lot of them had fallen off the sprue here, so I had to rearrange them, and I think in shipping some of them got a little bit marked up like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a Q-tip with a little bit of alcohol, like 99% isopropyl, and see if those blemishes come off, because on a pristine white set like this, they do show up quite clearly, and it would be a shame if our beautiful clean board didn't look as clean as it could. But anyway, these are OEM profile, standard stepping for the rose, nothing unexpected there. So just standard OEM profile, and they should look really, really nice when we put them on. And for the right price, absolutely. The last little element that I'm going to show you here before we start putting things together is this. These are O-rings, and O-rings are exactly what they sound like. They're just tiny silicone rings, and what you do with these are an optional component. You don't need these, but they're very cheap. This package of 150 was like, I don't know, $3.50 on Banggood. You can pay more for them if you really want to get nerdy about it and pick the firmness and things like that. But honestly, these will do you just fine. They're little translucent silicone rings, and you put them under each keycap, and they simply cushion the blow of the keycap when you bottom out, and they will allow you to avoid that harsh taka sound and feel if you don't like bottoming out on a hard surface. You can get these in different firmnesses if you want to bottom out on something softer or harder. But what these are a softer material, and I believe they're 1.5 millimeter. So we might actually have to stack a few of them up under each key to provide the cushioning that we need. We'll have to experiment with that. But they should provide a nice bouncy and soft bottom out that makes this whole board a little quieter, because that metal backplate and the aluminum I think would make for a very loud board without O-rings. Of course, it's entirely a matter of taste. If you like that hard bottom out and that loud taka noise, then maybe you want to skip on the O-rings. But for the price, $3.50 or so for 150 O-rings, I thought I'd get some. We'll try them out. And I think that'll be preferable for me, because I like a middling board in terms of its loudness. I don't need the loudest board in the world. Alright, so those are all the component pieces of our board. Now it's time to put them all together. Okay, so I actually changed my mind, and we're going to do the box Heavy Pale Blues first. But what I have here actually is a collection of several switches, and I just want to demonstrate how, in theory, they should all fit into these hot swap sockets. So the first one I have here is an Outemu blue switch. You can see, hopefully on there, it reads Outemu. That might be upside down for you there. So this Outemu blue actually does have a surround on the stem, or around the stem, which is uncommon, but some of their blue models seem to have it. I don't know why some do and some don't, but I've seen it both with that surround or without, more like this, with just the bare stem. Either way, you can hear that it has a very typical blue switch sound. Sounds a lot like a Cherry MX blue, if you listen. And you can hear that on the upstroke, it doesn't really have a click. It has a slight sound, but not much of a click. Click down, release up. Click down, release up. Anyway, that is a similar behavior to a Cherry MX blue. Point is that if we bring it down here and we pop it into one of these sockets, it should fit in quite happily. Ta-da! Just like that. You can hear there's a lot of metallic sound there. Transduces that click straight into the board. And that's what I have those O-rings for. So the Outemu switches seem to fit just fine. Unfortunately, I could not find my Cherry MX switches. I have a set of testers, and I was going to show them to you and put them in here to prove that they would work, but I, for the life of me, cannot find them. So, but anyway, we have the Outemu, which is a pretty competent Cherry clone. Here we have a Zelio switch. This is a sort of bespoke kind of switch that is a collaboration, I think, or at least a custom switch made by Zeal PC. And these are known for being really satisfying tactile switches. There's a real noticeable bump in there. And these are a bit heavier. I think they're about 65 grams actuation. But they have a Gatoron housing. You can see that they've repurposed Gatoron housings for these Zelios. Maybe you can see the branding on there. It says Gatoron. So those should fit quite happily in here as well. And indeed they do. So we've looked at the Outemu switch, which is sort of a proxy for a Cherry switch, and we've looked at the Zelio, which is sort of a proxy for a Gatoron switch. Then finally we have our Kale box blue with that nice double click action. Click down, click up, click down, click up. And this is what we're going to be loading this board up with, at least for now. So let's get started. I'm just going to pop them in here. Probably won't talk much. Got my whole bag. This is a bag of 70 switches available from Banggood. And they're just packed in bulk like this, basically. So let's get started. They just push in very easily. Doesn't take much force. They pop out quite easily too. Not so easily that you can pull them out with your bare hand, but with that puller they come out quite easily. you can see these switches are designed for surface mount LEDs. They have this gap at the top here, which allows the SMD LED to shine through. And the clear top housing, which helps diffuse that light. There are, of course, like I said, 70 switches in this bag, but there are 61 keys on this board, so we won't actually use all the switches. But it's good to have some spares just in case something happens, you accidentally damage or break off a contact, or maybe some of them are defective, or who knows, you lose a couple. It's good to have a few spares. Switch these around so you can see what's happening with the board a little better. Of course, the beauty of all this is there's no soldering required. It's just as easy as pushing the switches into the sockets. There's only one way they go in, so you can't really mess it up. one has a slightly bent contact pin here. So there's a bit of resistance when I tried to push it in there. Hopefully. There we go. If you bend the pins, that's okay. Just bend them back. If you bend them to the point where they come off, well, that switch is no good. But that's why we have a few extras. One's a little bent too. Hopefully it goes in properly. Yeah, no problem. Almost there. One more. Done. As you can see, it was the work of just a few minutes to get all those switches in. It's really, really easy. And we should have 9 switches left. Let's count. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 switches left over. So we did get the full 70 switches in there as expected. I love how clicky these things are. Lovely, lovely clicky switches. And I think that extra weight, the heaviness of the box heavy pale blues will be really satisfying to type on as well. If you like a thicker click, you can also get the box jades, which have a lighter actuation force, but a click that is twice as strong. That seemed a little excessive to me, which is why I went for the pale blues, but if you're a fan of the thick clicks, you can get the box jade switches. But for now, let's put on the keycaps. So, like I was saying, these keycaps, they are that PVT material, which is a little bit brittler than an ABS plastic. if we just pop them on here, this should go on very easily, just like so. That's a pretty harsh bottom out. You can hear, if I don't let the click reset, you can hear just how hard that bottom out is. Here, let's listen. Now some people probably like that, but I'm going to put on some of these here O-rings and see how that sounds. So I bet it'll be a lot softer. I made the mistake of putting the keycap puller away. I should have held on to it so that I can get that off. There we go. So we take our O-rings. Like I said, there should be 150 in here. They are 1.5 millimeters in thickness, which is pretty thin, so we might actually need a couple or a few of these in order to properly pad these things. So let me just put one on here. Oh, you can't really see that, but here. You can see I've just pushed it down on the keycap there, on the stem or the socket, whatever you call it, on the bottom of the keycap. And if we put that on, so that doesn't really do it. We still have a pretty harsh bottom out. So we're going to need more. Now, this is the tallest row because of how the profile changes from the front to the back of the board. And the top row has the tallest profile caps. So these ones will require the most O-rings. Let's put on another one there. See if 2 does it. No, 2 does not do it. It's still a pretty hard bottom out. Let's try one more. Bad form for me to be pulling these caps off with my fingers, but oh well. You see, I'm just slipping them over there, pushing them down a bit. You can push them down with your finger, or if you have like a pen or something to push them down with, as long as they're securely over the socket there. Once you push them down onto the switch, they should push into position. There we go, I think that did it. I can feel a softer bottom out. Let's test it. Much softer compared to what we had before. Listen. Ignore the little clicks. That's just me actuating the switch by accident. But you can hear that bottom out sound much quieter with those O-rings. So now, when we type, we'll get the clicks without that hard bottom out. By way of comparison, let's just, I'll throw this one on here so we can have 2 side by side. One with O-rings, one without, and you can hear the difference. O-rings, no O-rings. O-rings, no O-rings. Again, matter of personal preference, but I like that softer bottom out. And it's not a mushy bottom out, that's the great part. It's still, in fact, if anything, it's springy. Springier, right? Because you're not just bottoming out onto the metal backplate, you're actually getting sort of some bounce back from the O-rings. So it's kind of a nice springy feel, which is great. Okay, the business of getting all these caps on here. It's going to take a little while because I got to get the O-rings on. But hope you stick around. Probably make some sounds along the way. And once I've got all the caps on, we'll take this board for a test drive. I think this is going to look really good when it's done. I also think that hopefully the lower rows with the lower profile caps will only take 2 or even 1 O-ring, because if they all take 3, I'm actually going to run out of O-rings here. Let's hope it's just this top row that takes 3. Oh yeah, that sounds great. I'm just pushing each one down firmly to make sure those O-rings are properly seated all the way into the switch there, or into the cap. So I'm just kind of slipping them over the socket here initially. If you got thicker O-rings that were, say, 2mm or 2.5, 2mm is more common than these 1.5mm rings, but you would be able to get away with stacking fewer of them. You wouldn't need to stack 3, you could probably stack 2, but this works. Stacking them up will work just fine. And because they're translucent, I don't think they're going to occlude the light at all. I think that the backlight should come through just fine. Because this is a 60% board, the F-row keys go unused. It's just the number keys up along the top here, And then on the secondary function layer, they are the F keys. When you've got multiple sockets on the bottom like this, you don't need to put O-rings on all of them. Just the one that connects to the switch should be all you need. So that's the central one here, of course, on this backspace key. The other ones will just slot into the stabilizers. Oh, that's a wonderful feeling backspace key. And those stabilizers, no rattle. Beautiful. Lovely. One row down, only 4 more to go. Alright, let's see if we can get by with fewer O-rings on this next row. I think we probably can, because if you compare the profile of these rows, this is the row we're just about to start on, like so, and this is the row we just finished, like so. That was quite a bit taller, so bet you we can get by with 2 on this next row. But we'll start with 1, and we'll see if that does the trick. I don't think it will. Does not. We still have a firm bottom out. So let's put 1 more on. And hopefully that does the trick. Sure does. Which means we ought to have enough O-rings in this bag to finish the board. Nice thing as well is that once these O-rings are on these caps, we can take the caps off, swap out the switches, and just put the O-rings back, or put the switches back on. Sorry. We can take off the caps, swap out the switches, and put the caps back on, and we don't have to redo all the O-rings, is what I'm trying to say. Once they're on the caps, they're on the caps. You can take them off if you want, but you don't have to. You can just keep them on there and just swap the switches. I think this thing's going to feel heavenly to type on. Honestly. I'm not even a big fan of clicky switches usually. I am a tactile switch fan. So those box heavy burnt oranges are more my speed normally, more the kind of feedback I'm looking for. But these box pale blues are just, the clicks are so divine. So maybe I'm more of a clicky guy. Pardon me, that was very loud. Maybe I'm more of a clicky guy than I thought I was, but I just didn't have the right clicks. I much prefer these clicks to the clicks on a Cherry MX style switch. Or or I should say Cherry MX Blue, or Cherry MX Blue clone. This is what's so great about the diversification of the mechanical keyboard market, and just all these new switch types that have become available in the last few years. I believe these particular switches, the box heavy switches, were the result of a collaboration between Kale and Novel Keys. Pretty sure that's how they came about. But you can buy them from places like Banggood. This row's going a little faster because it's only got 2 O-rings per cap. Takes a little less time to put them on. Wonderful sense of solidity all around. Next row up has, I believe, the same profile as the one we just finished. So that should be a two ring row, but let's just try one just in case. If I can slip that on there, there we go. Yeah, I think we're still getting a slightly hard bottom out there. I think 2 is ideal. Well, maybe not. Maybe 1's all we need on that row. Yeah, I think 1 might do the job there. No, I lied. We definitely need to. There we go. That's the soft bottom that we're looking for. Is this the same profile as the previous row? Honestly, I'm not even sure. Let's do a little comparison. If I can get this off here. Just trying to get the switch off of the, or the cap off of the sprue here. There we go. So it's the previous row. This is the current row. Same profile. I think. Close enough. Close enough. You can look it up online if you're curious. You can see what the heights, how they change for each row. Hope the space bar on this sounds and feels good. Hope those stabilizers there aren't too rattly. If rattly stabilizers really bother you, there is a procedure you can do. It's called clipping your stabilizers. There's a sort of a plastic tab on the bottom of the stabilizers that, as they're designed from the factory, it tends to impact the PCB and account for some unpleasant rattliness that people don't like. So you could, in theory, remove these and clip them and reinstall if you wanted, but that's kind of a pain. So we're not going to worry about it here today. Or at the very least, we'll test it out as is and see how it sounds and feels first. This is a ANSI layout board, American National Standards, ANS, American National Standards Institute, I guess. The I stands for Institute. Which is just a way of saying that it's the standard American layout. It doesn't have the sort of L-shaped enter that you see in ISO layouts, which is the common European layout. But these keycaps, actually, they do come with an ISO enter key. So, oh, that feels great. Really good. Solidity is on point. Yeah, these keycaps come with an ISO layout option. So if you are in one of the territories that uses the ISO layout, you can order these caps and use them just fine. And of course, one thing these caps do not have is any markings for the secondary legends, because they're generic caps, so of course there's no way that they could have the specific secondary legends for this board, which means you kind of have to learn them and memorize them, but that's not too much to overcome. I've been continuing to use 2 O-rings, and that seems to work just great. Stubborn cap here. Doesn't want to come. Well, let's move on to the next one. Make the previous one easier to get off, and I can get at it from the other side. O-ring down. Oh no, it's hiding in there. Let's see if we can get it out. Just scoop it up here. Nope. Okay. Gonna have to pull off the cap to get at it. There we go. There, we got that M cap off. Yeah, these little blemishes on these caps are regrettable. I do hope that when I take a bit of solvent, like a bit of alcohol to them, that they'll just come right off. So good. No rattle. No rattle. Listen. It's a thing of beauty. Honestly, it is. It's so much better than so many of those rattly boards you find. Rattly stabilizers. Harsh bottom out. These just sound so solid. And they feel solid too. That's even more important than what they sound like. It's what they feel like, right? And I get a lot of questions from people asking, why do you care about mechanical keyboards? Why do you care about your keyboards at all? Why would you spend so much money on keyboards, There's some people that just can't fathom spending, upwards of $100. That's easily spent on a mechanical keyboard, but some people will spend multiple hundreds of dollars on these things. But there's those that just can't fathom that, and I always say, to me, it's like it's a tool. It's a tool of my trade. I spend a lot of time on my computer doing computer stuff. And just like any craftsman wants the best tools, you want something that if you're interacting with something so much, you might as well enjoy it, right? It might as well feel good. That's pretty good. It's a little bit rattly, that space bar. But it ain't bad. So I think I'm happy with that. I'll see when I actually type on it, but I do think that these white caps look pretty darn good on this here aluminum chassis. And with the white underneath, it just all matches wonderfully. It's gorgeous. They even look nice with those blue switches, don't they? Not that you can see them once all the caps are on, but you could always, if you got the version with the black plastic case, you could get the black pudding caps, or any other caps you want, for that matter. I just have a thing for these pudding caps because I think they show off the RGB lighting so nicely. And that's something that we're going to test out in just a moment here, because we just put on the last cap. So there she is. Look at that. I think that's looking pretty darn nice myself. A solid board. Those nice high quality PBT caps with the high quality aluminum case and these nice precise clicks on the box. Heavy pale blues, I think, is fantastic. But as I always say, the proof is in the pudding. So while this may look gorgeous, is it going to sound gorgeous? Is it going to feel nice to type on? That is what we're going to find out next. Also, how's it going to look when the lights are on? All important questions. Let's go check that out right now. And here we have our brand new board plugged in and lit up, and you can see, I hope you can see, why I love these pudding caps so much. Because on a board like this, especially a board like this, with a bright white backplate. It just looks incredible. You get such this beautiful, vibrant, and diffuse glow across the whole keyboard. I think it just looks awesome. And I'm really happy overall with the aesthetics of this board. I think these caps look really, really good, with the exception of those blemishes, which are really bothering me. I have not got them off yet. But when it's lit up like this, you don't really notice, of course. It's only when you're looking at it under, a bright light. So let's look at the lighting. This is the default rainbow ripple that we see on all kinds of keyboards, and it looks really, really good here. This backlighting implementation seems really good. I will say that the warm colors are lacking a little bit. If you notice, the red band seems to be kind of muted compared to some of the other tones. Now, that could just be my color blindness, but it seems to me that it's definitely dimmer. Overall, though, the LEDs are very, very bright. This is maximum brightness, I think. So if we go function and what? I think this bracket here. Yeah, we're topped out. You see how that flashes? That's to show us we're as bright as we get. It's got a ton of brightness steps here. Let's go through them. Or let's go down in the brightness steps until we hit the bottom. There. And then it's off. Let's go back up. So that's the dimmest with actual lighting. And then we can go all the way back up. I think the manual says 21 brightness steps. Seems like a lot, but we can also adjust the speed of our effects. So this is pretty slow right now. In fact, it is the slowest, as you can see. If we go function quote button, you can see it gets pretty fast. It's just whipping along there. But even on the low speeds, it's a pretty smooth animation, which is a sign of good LEDs that can render lots of colors. You get those nice smooth lighting effects. Not the smoothest I've seen, perhaps, but pretty good. Pretty good, even on low speeds. Also, I need to point out, of course, if you see a flicker on the video, that's not real. Just an artifact of the camera and the LED interaction. I do not see any flicker in real life. We can also go function right square bracket, and the lighting on this keyboard is split into two different types. I don't really know why, but there's this category of lighting. So we saw the rainbow ripple. We've got rainbow circle here. Speed it up a little bit just to make it a little more apparent what's happening with the animations. We've got rainbow moving up the board. I like the look of that. I do not believe there is a way to change the direction of these effects in hardware. So the rainbow ripple goes one way. This lighting always goes up the board. That may be configurable in software. We'll see when we get there in part 2. I actually like this one quite a bit, honestly. I like that. And there's just solid. And in this case, it seems to be solid green. I don't know how to change the color of this effect. I don't know that there is a way, honestly, after having looked at the manual. But I'm sure that you could change it in software, so we will get there. But the solid color, I guess, is only green out of the box without installing the software. And then we've got this color cycling option. So you can see it does cycle through different solid colors. But yeah, it's kind of funny. And then we're back to the rainbow ripple. So that's all in that category under the right square bracket button. But if we go function backslash, we get a handful of other lighting options, such as the old classic press the button and it lights up. Getting to hear those switches. What do you think? You'll hear it much better in a moment. The old press and lines light up. Again, again, different colors each time. Yes, this one, the waves outwards. This one animates a little junkily. Is that a word, junkily? It is now. So that was not quite as smooth. And, oh yes, of course, and perhaps the best of them all, the sound reactive mode, where the whole thing becomes an equalizer. And let's see if it'll, see that? If we press some buttons, there you go. I don't know how accurate it is, but if I just start typing, it's quite colorful and bright. In theory, it's supposed to bump along in time to your music, but I'm not going to test that right now. Clearly, it's reacting to sound of some kind. See, that's just lighting up on the left side here because that's a low tone. But if I were to say clap, we're getting a higher frequency response there. I'll turn that down so you don't have to have me clapping super loud in your ears. And then that's it. That's the only other option. Or the only other options there. So there's what, maybe eight different lighting modes? 4 under this category and 4 under this category? Something like that. I think I'm going to keep it on this vertical rainbow sweep. I like that for now. So that's really all I can show you of the lighting right now. Like I said, part 2, we'll look at the software. There may be other options hidden away in the software. I hope there are, because otherwise it's a little bare bones, but we'll see. There are also, I think, lighting presets that you can access with the function button and like QWER, and those must be profiles that you configure in software, I would think. So we'll figure that out when we get there. Okay. And really not a lot else to talk about here. No wireless functionality on this board. There are, of course, other secondary functions going on here, but they are just your basic things, your home, page up, page down. That all seems to be represented with function. And then sort of the right-hand side of the board here. You saw the user manual when we looked at it earlier. So let's wrap this up. Well, not quite wrap it up. We'll do a typing test, an extensive one, because I love the sound this board makes, and I think you will too. And then we'll get back together face to face for a couple minutes just to summarize what we've seen here and to set up part 2, which will follow in about a week. But for now, the typing test. right, ladies and gentlemen, you've had a chance to see some of the lighting on this board. You've had a chance to hear those amazing, amazing Kale Box Heavy Pale Blue switches in action. And I'm going to save my final verdict on all these components for the end of part 2, which will follow this video in about a week. But I have to just take a moment to gush over the typing experience with this board. Oh my gosh, I've never experienced such a delightful typing experience. Whatever. I've never typed on something so awesome. You probably know that I am a self-professed tactile switch fan. I like those Cherry MX Browns and their relatives without the harsh clicks, just with the tactile bumps. I might have been converted to a clicky man after typing on these Kale Box Heavy Pale Blues. As I described earlier, they are basically Kale Box Whites, but with a heavier spring and a blue stem. And I really like the Kale Box Whites that I got to type on in a previous review. But these heavy pale blues, they pair so nicely. That heavier spring pairs so nicely with that heavier click that the Kale Box switches have. And I really prefer that click bar to the clicks on Cherry MX style switches. Like Cherry MX Blues, they ain't got nothing on the precision and the solidity of the click on these Kale Box switches. And the whole combination of the big heavy aluminum case, that big chunky thick thing, paired with that nice thick back plate, paired with these nice PBT switches, these super clicky heavy pale blue switches, and then those O-rings that dampen out the bottom out so you don't get that kind of rattly clack. You just get this very springy bounce back that's so satisfying if you're willing to type with heavier fingers. And that is the thing about these switches. They are heavy. You have to be willing to, commit quite a bit of force to each keystroke. And actually, it's taken me quite an adjustment period. I've had to learn to type a little bit heavier. Now, could that lead to more finger fatigue? Yeah, it could. In which case, you might want to consider the Kale Box White switches instead. They have a lighter actuation force by, I think, about 20 grams. Or 10, 15, I don't know, somewhere in there. They do feel lighter, I can say that much. But personally, I really like the feel of these heavy pale blues combined with the just solidity of that aluminum board, the bounce back and responsiveness provided by those O-rings. Altogether an incredible typing experience. I've had a chance to show it off to a couple of friends as well, and they all agree that this is unlike anything they've ever typed on before. So that is the recap I'm going to give so far. What's coming up next in part 2 is I'm going to swap out all those pale blue switches for the Kale Box Heavy Burnt Orange switches that we saw earlier. Those are tactile switches rather than clicky, and we will see if they can win me over, if they can win me back to the tactile side from the clicky side, because right now those pale blue switches have made an incredibly strong impression. But I will reserve final judgment until I've tried out those burnt orange switches. I'm looking very forward to it. So we'll swap out all those switches. We'll put the caps back on. We will then check out the software, because today we looked at the lighting, but only the options available in hardware, which were fairly limited. So next time we'll check out that software, see what other options we get with it, as well as like macros and key rebinding and stuff. I'm curious to see what the software offers. And then we will take that version of the board for a typing test as well and check out those tactile switches. And then finally, at the end of next week's part 2 video, I will summarize the pros and the cons of all the products that we've looked at here, all the pieces that we've put into this board, and give you my final verdict on the whole shebang. How does that sound? Okay? Awesome. So remember that if you would like to check out any of the products that you've seen here today, you can do so from the links down in the video description. And if you purchase something there, you support the channel. A portion of your purchase goes to supporting the channel as well, which is always, of course, very much appreciated. Special thanks to Banggood.com for supplying all the products that we used here in the video today. Really appreciate their support and their enthusiasm for putting this video together, because as you can probably tell, I'm very excited by the whole thing. I think that it's going to be something that you guys like. I hope you enjoy it too. All right. Thank you for watching part 1 of this DIY keyboard build video. I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it relaxing. And I look very forward to having you back here next time for another episode, part 2 of this series. Another episode of relaxing reviews. Bye for now, guys.